Hello and welcome to Katrina's Creations Wednesday edition. Today is going to be a knitting tutorial for knitting 2 at a time sleeves. So here are my sleeves and I am using what is called the magic loop method. So I am doing this on one set of long circular needles. So I'm going to turn the camera around and demonstrate how to do this. You could also use this same technique for knitting 2 at a time socks as well. So let me get the camera turned around and we will begin the tutorial. Now when I begin either socks or sleeves, I knit the cuffs first on separate needles, either on a 9-inch circular or on a set of double pointed needles. So I did the cuff individually. This was you can see it has a definite pattern to it, a little floral pattern, and it was a 16-row graph that I needed to follow before I began the sleeves. So as you finish the first cuff, or if you were doing socks and you were doing cuff down, you finish the first cuff, then you are going to slide it onto your needles. You're going to divide your stitches up. In this case, I had a total of 40 stitches. So I made sure when I slid it onto my needles, I held it just like this with both needles. Okay, so I held it just like this with both needles equal length, and I split my stitches. Like I said, it was 20 on each side. It was a total of 40. So I put 20 on this side, 20 on this side, with the working yarn in the back, and then I slid it all the way to the end where the loop is. I then took the second cuff and I did the same thing, and again you want to make sure that you have it evenly dispersed. So I had 20 stitches on each side, and I want to make sure that the working yarn is in the back. So when you hold this up and look at it, both of your working yarns here and here should be in the back. You don't want to have your cord twisted at all. And then you have a loop at the back here. You want to make sure that your circular needle is on a long enough cord. Like a short cord is not going to work for this. You're going to want a long enough cord so that you can have enough space for the increase as the sleeves or the socks get bigger, and that this loop isn't going to disappear by pulling on it. So let's get started with all of our working yarn in the back. There we go. We will be knitting this one first. So you want to hold on to this loop so you don't pull it too far by accident. And you want to take the needle that is in the back with the working yarn, and you want to pull it so that you have a good amount of cord showing. You're going to move these stitches that are on the front towards the point, and you're going to begin knitting across. Now this first stitch, you want to make sure you don't have a big gap here, or that you get stitches that will ladder. And as you can see, mine are nice and tight. You can't really see where this transition is here. So this first stitch that you knit, you want to really hold that back up tight to it, knit the stitch, and pull it good and snug. Otherwise you're going to have a gap between the stitches and it will look, it's called laddering. You don't want that to happen. So then we are going to knit all the way across. I am coming to the end of my first sleeve. So this is my last stitch. So you can now see, I tend to put my finger through this loop so I don't inadvertently pull it. So here's my second sleeve. Here's the one I just completed, and you can see that my working yarn is now all the way across and it is in the front. I'm just going to set it off to the side, and I'm going to pull a little bit more of the needle through, I'm going to do the same here. But this time you want to make sure you're not grabbing this working yarn. Make sure you grab the right working yarn for this sleeve. And again, you're going to do the same thing with that first stitch. You want to again make sure that they are close together. You don't want to have them apart like this and try to knit it, because you're going to get a great big gap right here. So pull that back cord up against it snug and knit that first stitch tight. That way it closes that gap right here between stitches. And we're going to go all the way across. Okay, I am coming up on the last stitch for this side of the sleeve. So there I go. Let's look at what I have. I have both sleeves done all the way across. They're not connected here. And I have the working yarn in the front for both sleeves. So now I'm going to show you how I turn it over and we get started again. I'm also going to show you, you don't have this problem with socks, but with sleeves, they do get wider as you go up from the cuff. And you can see I have some increases in here that are kind of random, but I'm going to show you how I do those as we go across so that they don't stand out real noticeably. So you're going to turn your sleeve. And one of the benefits, well actually there's more than one benefit for doing sleeves two at a time. You can make sure they are exactly the same length. You can make sure your increases are at the same places for each row. And the other thing, you don't end up with second sleeve syndrome, also known as second sock syndrome. If you do one and you go all the way through that sleeve, sometimes it's dreaded to go through and have to do it again on the second sleeve, trying to remember where all of the increases were, make sure it's exactly the same size, and you're having to count all the rows. This way you end up eliminating all of that, and they're both done at the same time and you're ready to move on with your work. So let's get started. First thing you're going to do is I always stick my finger in the loop. So since I've turned these over now, you will notice that your working yarn is now in the back like it was for the last row. So you're going to hold your finger here so you don't pull it out by accident, and you're going to pull this needle so that the cord is more out on the back. And you can see my fingers holding it in place. And you're going to move all these stitches on the first sleeve closer to the needle. You're going to begin that first stitch making sure you close this gap. So you want to hold that back row close up and knit that first stitch tightly like that. So you close that gap. You don't have a big laddered section in between here. Now I'm going to go about halfway across, and that's when I'm going to do my increase. Alright, now there's many different ways you can do an increase. You could just pick up this little middle stitch right here, like this, and knit. However, it tends to create a little hole right here and you don't want that hole. The other option is you can always knit, put this stitch on like that, and then continue knitting. But again, it doesn't always end up looking the nicest. So this is the seamless way that I do it. I do what's called making a stitch. You can do it making a stitch left or right, whichever one's more comfortable for you, or you can do one of each. But you go into this little middle piece here, like this, and then you knit through the back loop. Like that. And I'll show you what that looks like and why I do it that way. There is that stitch. That is your new stitch, and it has a little twist to it, which will fill in this little gap. And then you knit the stitch next to it regularly. So you have added a stitch. And when you look at it, it doesn't really show. It looks the same as all the other stitches. It'll be a little bit tighter when you come through in the next row because, as you can see right here, it almost looks like a purled stitch because it's twisted, but it just helps fill in that gap a little bit. So let me show you one more time how to do that before we move on. You get this little middle stitch right here. You go through, you can go through the front or go through the back. In my case, I go through the front. Then I take the right needle and I knit it through that back loop right there. Like that. You take that twisted stitch off and then you knit the next stitch. And there it is. You can again see it kind of looks like a little purl stitch. And like I said, you will notice those are a little tighter when you go through. So that's how I do my increases. So now let's go back to finishing this side of the sleeve and working on to the next one. I'm down to the last 3 stitches on this side of the sleeve. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and 3. The working yarn is now in the front. So there's the back and is over on the right side. So I'm going to put this one down. I'm going to move the second sleeve forward. I'm going to slide this through here. And again, keep my finger in the loop so it doesn't get pulled out. I'm going to separate this sleeve so that working yarn is still in the front. The one I'm working on, you want to make sure, before I have actually forgotten to drop these yarns and knitted straight across and then joined my sleeves by accident. We don't want that to happen, so you want to make sure you separate it, make sure you grab from the back here, and you're going to begin knitting across. Again, watching that first stitch that you pull it tightly like that. Give it a good little tug to make sure it stays tight. And then you're going to knit all the way across. I will do another increase on my way across in the middle. Okay, I'm getting ready to do my increase, and I want to put this up close so you can kind of see where my increases are. I mean, you can see them, but you can see there's no holes, or it doesn't stand out very obviously on the sleeve itself. Okay, so I go through, you can see this little ladder right there. I'm going to put my left needle through it. There you can see I've picked it up, and here's that back loop right here. I'm going to knit through that back loop. There you can see I've picked it up. I'm going to knit it like that. It goes off of my needle, and now I knit the next stitch. And I have increased by 1 stitch right there. And there's that little twist that gives it a look of a purl. Now I'm going to knit to the end of the row. When you come back around the next time, you're just going to knit that stitch that you increased, the same as you would any other stitch. It just will feel a little bit tighter because of the twist. Okay, I'm on the last stitch. There it is. I drop that end of the needle, look at both of my sleeves, and my working yarn is in the front on the right or the left hand side, and I'm going to turn it over again the way I've been doing so that way the working yarn is now in the back. I'm going to hold my finger here and I'm going to pull the front needle short and the back needle I'm going to make longer. And we are ready to begin the next row. So that is how you do 2 at a time sleeves or 2 at a time socks. So I hope you have found this helpful. If you have, please give me a thumbs up, and I will see you in our next video on Saturday. Thanks for watching, everybody.